The Real Life Real Estate Investing Show, where we talk about real life real estate situations, but we bring you real life real estate solutions. And I'm your host, Glenn Glasper, affectionately known as Mr. Dollar Out of a Dime. And I have with me my wonderful guest, who's actually a past member of the Wonder Women of Real Estate. That's going to be happening again real soon. Ms. Pavielle Dortch of the firm Pavielle Dortch, LLC. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
Very good, very good. You know, I'm a little under pressure. I'm trying to get this thing together.
You're doing fine.
But thank you so much for joining us today. This is long overdue. I know we talked about this a while back.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad you had a moment in your schedule from doing all the closings in Atlanta.
Yes, I'm glad I've learned to schedule
right
for people.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. So what we're going to talk about today, guys, is a lot of stuff that we as investors and those of us that are wholesalers and in any area of real estate investing, mostly the things that we miss that we need to be paying attention to when we're going to closing. Because a lot of times what we hear is we can buy houses with no money down, and people get excited and they get into business and they sign up for these programs, and then it's time to close and nobody knows what to do. So that's when your job becomes quite a bit interesting, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
So how often do you have to teach at the closing table? Well, let's tell the folks who you are. Tell, where you're from, and talk a little bit about your firm and how long you've been doing what you're doing.
Okay, so my name is Pavielle Dortch. I was born in Louisiana. I moved to Georgia when I turned 12.
So about 10 years ago?
God, I wish. We're not going to talk about that. I had a dream of actually being a scientist, and then my mother told me, as a black female, you need to get a realistic job. So I became an attorney. And
so
then
you couldn't be one of the hidden figures people?
No. She's in IT, and she's like, nope, do something else.
Okay.
So I ended up going to the Midwest for law school, wanted to be a labor attorney, hated the Midwest. So I came home, and then real estate found me. And then from there, the rest has been history. I started my practice about a year and a half ago, while I think I was 5 months pregnant. Most people knew me wobbling around with files in my arms. And I've been doing it ever since, and it's been amazing. And back to your question of teaching people, it actually starts when I get the initial contract. And it happens more often than not. Usually the new attorneys get the new real estate investors, and so we have the luxury of teaching them as we're learning to navigate the business ourselves.
Wow.
And it's not that bad, because then that gives me an opportunity to train the investors from the ground up.
Yes.
So they can know how to work with me. And then some people say I spoiled them. Yes, I do, because I have a motherly tendency.
Yes.
But then I also, in that motherly tendency, I try to prepare them for when they go to work with somebody else, and they know what to do. So it's a great opportunity to be in, even though it may cause some hiccups every now and again.
So I want to know, now we've talked several times, and I want to know, what is it that, let's go back, let's make it, we'll go do some basics.
Okay.
What is it that you see in contracts? And we're going to talk about wholesalers. What is it that you see in a wholesaler contract that surprises you? I mean, you're probably not surprised by much of the stuff that you see now, but
it's not what's in there, it's what's not in there. So what I've noticed about a lot of the wholesale contracts, you guys get these forms and you just use a form. You don't tailor the form whether or not to you being the buyer or seller. You don't make sure there's enough information. You don't give yourself enough time. A lot of times what I see in a wholesale contract, you give the seller an unrealistic expectation of closing like this. And you haven't even found a buyer yet. And so then you're calling me like, hey, can you hold off the seller for another 2 weeks because I don't have a buyer yet?
Yeah.
So it's like you have to be strategic. Within those four lines is like the most important part of your transaction as an investor. So you need to make sure everything in there is ironed out to exactly what you need it to do. So if you're a wholesaler and you have a seller under contract, you want to make sure you have a right to extend that contract in the event that you do have a hiccup. You also want to make sure, for my sake, you actually put the seller's phone number and email address on that contract, because at that point I'm looking at you to give me all the information. You're like, well, I told you. And I'm like, it has nothing. I can't do nothing with this. And another thing I've noticed that you guys don't do, which you think is a great thing, is not. You have to start paying some type of earnest money. In law, a contract is only binding when there's an offer, acceptance, and consideration. That earnest money is your consideration. Let it be $1. Give the seller $1 that day. But make sure you pay something in consideration to say, hey, I am going to do this. Because eventually, if a seller is wise enough and they find an attorney to help them, like, oh, this contract's not binding, they didn't pay you anything. So those are the little things that you want to look at. Then with your end buyer contracts, I have some investors who don't want to pay anything. Well, you need a stipulation in your contract that states that specifically. So it's more so not what's in it, it's what's missing.
Yes.
And I think what needs to happen is there needs to be a class, or what I tell most investors, take 5 contracts you like and pull out what you want and merge it into one so it fits you. Because one contract doesn't fit all.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, and I've seen that on several occasions where I get contracts from different different buyers, or different sellers that are wholesalers, pretty much, and they say, use my contract, and I'm like, if you know what's in this contract, you give me all the power. So that, you know, the teacher in me, the educator in me says, okay, let's use my contract. At least in there, it gives you some leverage and me some leverage. Me, of course, a little more leverage, but it gives you a little more than what you had in your contract. So I see that quite a bit, yeah. So we got some folks that are joining us. Thank you all for joining us. Hi. For those of you that are joining us, please go ahead and share this in your news feeds, because we're going to be sharing some amazing information today. And these are the things that investors and wholesalers and people that are involved in real estate alike need to be paying attention to. So let me ask you this: Do you primarily deal with wholesalers as a closing attorney, or do you do regular closings for the regular buyer, I guess?
I do a combination of both. I'm becoming snooty with my wholesalers, so I'm starting to vet them and pick specifically who I want to work with.
I'd love to hear about that. Go ahead.
But I do a combination of both, so it's a different energy. And then sometimes if a wholesaler is good enough, they're able to sell to a retail buyer. Not necessarily good enough, but if that's the market you're looking to promote in, they're able to sell to a retail buyer, and I do both. They
have to be good enough.
Okay. Yeah. So, and they're two different beasts. With investors, there's an expectation that you understand what you're doing. With a layperson, I am more, back to that motherly thing, I'm more nurturing and gentle. With investors, I treat you like a redheaded stepchild and say, hey, you didn't do your job, let's get to it. And so there's higher expectations in one realm than the other. But if you're able to get to that ability, there's more money when you're working with retail buyers than when you're selling to investors. So if you can get a house that is in great condition and you have a buyer that wants it and they can just get a little construction loan to fix it up, that may be the direction you want to go.
And there are loan programs that will allow that. So that's good information. So let's talk about you said you get snooty with wholesalers. Tell us why.
I have gotten snooty because, what's that analogy with the strip club? You want me to clap, drop, shake, and you only want to give me $1.
Pavi said it, yo.
And it's like, when I'm working with wholesalers, that's the feeling. It's like, okay, I need you to do this, this, and this. Plus, I need you to do this. And then, can you cut your fee?
Oh, what? They actually ask you that?
Yes.
Wow.
So it's like, okay, you want me to work miracles. I'm turning water into wine, because you know the titles these days are just straight up water. You need, and then so that's the feeling. So now I've started to work with wholesalers who I'm still willing to train. I'm still willing to work with newbies, but these are the criteria.
Got it.
And if you can't meet these criteria, I will quickly be like, hey, you know, there's such and such out there. He's great with wholesalers, or there's such. I will send you away. And it's not like, and I'm saying this to say we all need to eat, right?
Yes.
And so with me sending business away, that means I'm not eating. So So that means I really don't want your deal if I'm sending it away.
Yeah.
And that sounds very arrogant and snooty, doesn't it?
Not at all. You know what I say to that, because I've grown, and it's growth. That's what I'll call it. I've grown to a point where I understand that there are certain types of people that I will work with and certain types of people that I won't work with. And for those of us who have, I guess, specialized knowledge in the area that we do what we do, we should get to the point where we have that right. Because, everybody deserves a chance. I believe everybody deserves a chance. But it's those of us that get to the point now we're calling ourselves wholesalers and we're ready to go to closing. It's right of you to have the expectation that this person has done enough homework and done enough studying and learned enough to get to the point of saying, I'm a wholesaler and now I'm ready to go to close. Right. I mean, it's only right. I mean, because we have to look at what we do and what we offer in terms of education and information. Our time is valuable. It's taken us quite a bit of time to learn what we know, and it costs you a whole lot more than it costs me.
Yes, it has.
So I mean, for that I say, people have to respect that you've invested in your education, and the time that you spend still teaching people who should have learned already. Maybe you should start charging people.
I actually am. Side note, I'm going to start training on how to do prelim titles on gsccca.org. Hit me up on Facebook.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, we have to plug that.
We will. And I'll explain later why I want wholesalers to actually start being able to do prelim titles themselves.
Yes. That's very important. I mean, because you pay for that. And then they bring you something, and then there's a mess, and you got to clean up the mess, and then they ask you to cut your fee. Oh, wow, you're a better person than I am.
Oh, who said I cut
it? We got John Stafford says, well, what's up, Pavi? Drop the jibs. But, it's so important, and I think, what you're talking about as far as teaching the prelim titles, that's going to be something that people really need to tune into. I might want to work with you on that.
Okay, cool. We'll talk about it.
Because I think I already got some idea of how we make that happen. But anyway, I think so. What are some of the other challenges that you've had with wholesalers or new wholesalers, aside from contracts and things like that?
The relationships that they end up having. So the hardest person to work with is a seller after they've worked with a wholesaler. Because that seller feels like they've been neglected throughout the whole process. And that's why I said it was key to have that contact information on the contracts, because then that way I'm able to reach out to the seller and talk to them directly versus having to go through the wholesaler who's trying to probably facilitate multiple deals. But I had a closing back in 2015. The seller got to the table and did not want to sign, because she just did not trust the buyer anymore.
Wow.
And then because she didn't trust him and he picked me, she didn't trust me.
Yeah,
So we ended up having to drive to SunTrust for her to verify that the check that I had in my hand for $400,000 was good. And so it's like, this business is not, I get it, on to the next one, but finish it first and finish it well, because you don't know how that seller can benefit you later. Like one guy, he's told me he's built a relationship with a seller where they had multiple properties and they were able to sell him more. And they got to know him as a wholesaler and respected him enough to say, hey, here, make sure you get your fee. But then there are other sellers who are like, I don't want to deal with this. I don't even want to be here.
Wow.
So you gotta be careful with that relationship piece. It's not just with your end buyers, but it's with your sellers too.
Yeah. One of the things that I teach in my wholesaling, when I teach wholesaling, I talk about the three most important things that are involved in wholesaling. And many people say the price, dealing with the this and doing that, and I always say the three most important things is win, win, win. That everybody wins. And most people look at when they're doing a deal with a seller, the seller has to lose something in order for them to gain. And I look at it, if you go into it with that mentality, you're not going to last in this business. Because, we have sellers that are in distressed situations and they deal with certain situations that cause them to have to sell. Right. But if we create a situation, because we're solution providers, is what I say. We provide a solution for them so that they can sell, but they still even if it's a situation where they walk away with no money at all, we provided a solution for them so that they're not stressed in that situation. You know what I mean?
I know.
But some people will look at the situation where they walk away with no money at all, but then they want them to bring money to sell their property. Try to bleed them all the way out.
Yeah, I've had those happen too, and the sellers just walked away. And at that point, it's frustrating for me because, on average, I probably put in a good 5 to 10 hours on each file.
Wow.
Because that's, especially with the files that are coming out of Atlanta, because you have to do a whole lot of title clearing. Mm-hmm. And so for a seller to walk away at the table, it's like a smack in your face.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back to the basics a little more.
Okay.
Walk us through a typical scenario of when you receive a contract. What happens beyond that?
So from my perspective, what happens is once you give me a contract, then I'll provide you what is called the buyer's and seller's information sheets. Those forms, when the attorneys give them to you, are very, very important. And if you start working with an attorney on a regular basis, they will love you if you keep their forms and get them filled out well in advance, because those forms give us everything we need to clear title. So once we've sent the information out, we request title. That usually is taking anywhere from 5 to 7 business days. So when your attorney says title isn't back yet, understand that it's the summer, and so everybody and their mama is buying. So that means all the title examiners are tied up right now. So you're kind of stuck in the order that the title's sent in. Then once we get it back, we review it. If it's pretty and clean, we close. If it's ugly and nasty, you're gonna have to wait. And usually, with myself, I try to let the parties know what's wrong with the file. Mm-hmm. So there's an open loan deed back from 1993 or something like that, and we have to reach out to those lenders. And if you are able to assist in getting it done, that's great. But if you're not able to assist, don't hinder. And hindering means calling or emailing, because the time I have to stop and take to address your call or email is valuable time taken away from clearing that title. Right. And so if we get it cleared, and when we get it cleared, then we're able to close. And then that's when prelim HUDs go out, wiring instructions go out, and then money comes in. We all sit at the table, do the happy little signing, and then everybody goes on their merry way. But the work for me doesn't end there. So that means I have to then, after we close, send everything off to the county, pay all the bills that are due on that file, and then in the end, go back and double check title just to make sure it's clear once everything has been resolved. So even though you guys are done at the table, we're not. So remember, we're not only preparing your files, we're also getting everything cleaned up on the back end as well.
Wow. I think it's very important for investors, people that do real estate business, to understand that process, because, like you said, most of them. I'm not going to. I don't want to talk about them because I'm one of them. But most of us don't understand the complete process and all of that.
Gotcha.
And what we're just excited about is just to get a check. Once we get the check, we're good. We don't care how it happens.
As long as it got here.
Right. Just let me give me my check or give me my wire. It's all good. But I believe that process is very important for most of us to know, for all of us to know, because I've had wholesalers or investors that I've dealt with that are calling the closing attorney. I had one guy call the closing attorney so many times, they almost killed the deal. Because the closing attorney had a relationship with the lender. And the closing attorney called the lender and said, well, who's this person that keeps calling? And the buyer, they're like, I'm the buyer and I'm using the lender. The lender's lending me money, and he doesn't know this person that's not even on the title that's calling to try and find out what's going on with the closing. He's like, I don't know if I want to fund this deal because it seems like something's fishy's going on. And I'm like, okay, so I had to call and let the wholesaler know, listen, don't call anymore because the closing attorney is calling the lender, because they have a relationship, so that process is very necessary for us to understand. Like, there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that we don't know, that we can't call you and say, I need it to happen, and you push a button and everything gets closed in the next 5 minutes.
That's true, and I know that summary of the process I gave you sounds so clear cut. Like, she said this, this, and this, boom, boom, boom.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to remember, when we're requesting help, we're requesting help from a third party.
Yes.
And so if it's on their time when they move to help us, and not on our time. So, like the IRS, I had to get an IRS lien released. It took about 4 weeks.
Wow. Wow.
And the reason is, think about the IRS now.
The IRS, right.
They're slow to get you your money, but they will demand stuff from you. So it's whatever system. So when you hear, okay, it's an open loan, just expect it's going to take 4 to 8 weeks. If it's an IRS lien, expect 2 to 4 weeks, depending on what type of lien it is. And then kind of learn based on what the issue is, and that gives you kind of a ballpark of how long it's going to take. And then ask when the attorney says, hey, we have a title issue, it's this, this, and this. Well, on average, how long does that take? Mm-hmm. And then that way you're given information to say, okay, well, we're probably going to need to get an amendment. Oh, yeah, by the way, if you know there's a title defect, go ahead and start working on getting your amendments, because that helps us without having us to ask you, hey, we're going to need an amendment to extend this.
Yes. So, explain to the people what an amendment is. I know it's elementary for you, but
hold on. Let me try to. Hold on. So, an amendment is it's a document that is added to the contract to say these terms have changed from. It's amending the original terms. Mm-hmm. So, usually, say for instance, you have to change the buyer's name. The amendment will say this amendment is changing the buyer from A to B, or the closing date from June 1st to July 1st. So, it's changing what was in that original document.
Mm-hmm. So that gives them the ability to extend the date, change the terms, and that kind of thing.
Right.
Because most people won't have an idea of what an amendment is.
Okay. So I'm going to try to post some, and that's the other thing. There's a lot of forms that you guys don't have that you need, and I haven't gotten my website up to where I want it yet. So if there's anybody who wants legal help in exchange for web service help, I'm more than willing to barter. But I'm working on.
Take you up on that.
I'm more than willing to, if you send me an email and say, hey, I need this type of agreement. If I have it, I'll send it to you. If I don't, I'll say I don't have that. But I can try to draft you one. Mm-hmm. But you need these forms. You'll need like an amendment, a termination agreement. Always have your own termination agreement. What else is there that I've noticed that people have been needing? Marketing fee agreements, joint venture agreements. These agreements are very important. And don't always assume because you have a verbal agreement with Joe Schmo that he's going to pay you when you actually get to the table. You want to make sure you have that in writing, and you can send that over to your attorney, be like, hey, I heard y'all are closing here. Joe Schmo agreed to pay me X.
Right. Elvin had a very interesting statement. Elvin Hawkins had a very interesting statement. Elvin, stick around. I want to get to that. We're not there yet, but I want to make sure we address that. It's a very interesting statement.
Okay.
It says wholesalers are breaking the law. We'll talk about that.
From the real estate perspective. Gotcha.
Yeah. So the checklist. Let's talk about a checklist. I mean, you kind of gave a little bit of what is expected. So for a package, because I know you guys have packages that you put together for your for closing your closing package. Mm-hmm. What would you say? I mean, aside from the amendment, is there anything that you should expect? What's a good package that comes from an investor or a wholesaler to get the deal closed?
So a signed contract that has both parties' information on it, the seller's and buyer's information sheet returned within 72 hours of receipt. Making sure that earnest money has been deposited if it has been agreed upon that earnest money is supposed to be deposited. And that's pretty much it. It's like the job of a wholesaler to the attorney's office is pretty easy as long as they meet those few requirements.
Mm-hmm. So they don't have to do a whole lot of work to get the deal closed?
No. It's really, because once you've given us the contract, it's on us to make it happen.
I was about to say something. So that means they should be doing their due diligence and make sure they're providing all the information to the person that's going to buy. I'm just talking some stuff. But a lot of wholesalers think they're supposed to do any work.
Oh yeah. That does kill me. That really does kill me because Oh, and trust your attorney too.
Yes.
Please do.
Yes.
Because if I'm not talking to you, trust that I'm talking to your seller. And if you're getting a prelim HUD saying that closing is pending, don't call me cursing me out because I didn't talk to you the whole way through.
Right.
Because I was handling things with your seller and your buyer to make sure you got paid. So trust us.
Absolutely.
That's the key, trusting us.
Definitely. So that's a good question. So when we're talking about trusting the attorney, who do you work for in the transaction?
Okay, so that varies. And the funny thing is, I was talking. I had there was a question asked at Errol's event, and I was kind of shaky on the answer. So when there's a lender involved, I always represent the lender. Typically, I represent the party who has selected the agency to do their closing. So if the seller is the one that says the attorney has to be Pavielle Dortch LLC, then I represent the seller. If the buyer says the attorney has to be Pavielle Dortch LLC, then I represent the buyer.
So wherever you're at in a transaction, who you want to be the person that selects the person that does the closing.
Right.
I always do.
Good. And no, sellers, if you're selling a deal, you do have the buyer has a right to choose the attorney, but there's a thing called negotiating. So if you prefer to work with this attorney, like, okay, look, buyer, I'll give you $500 in seller paid closing costs for you to close with my attorney. That's to help with the closing fees. The buyer will move with you. Who doesn't want to take up a little bit of money?
Absolutely. Wow, you just gave probably $1,000 worth of information right there.
See, we got to start charging for
I
this.
know, right? It's called monetization. You have to make that work. So we have Dustin Griffin. How you doing, sir? Thank you for joining us. And we have Dennis Shin that says awesome information.
Hey, Dennis.
Thank you all for joining us. Errol's watching. Thank you for being with us today. So this might. I want to get into this question. We'll go ahead and jump into it.
Okay.
It might take us off a little track, but I think it's a very important question, and I want to make sure the people are watching that they hear what you have to say about this. As an attorney, Elvin says, wholesalers are breaking the law and acting as agents by marketing properties they don't have under contract.
So it depends on what you mean by under contract. So if wholesalers are marketing properties for the seller, so let's talk about what a real estate agent does. A real estate agent gets into a binding agreement with the seller to list their property on FMLS and MLS. And then that agent, eventually a buyer comes along, and then their agent creates this agreement that both parties signs. Well, the difference between a real estate agent and a wholesaler is a wholesaler has a contract with the owner of record. So at that point, they're technically the buyers of that property. And then from there, and this is why daisy chains are a problem. We will talk about that.
I can't wait.
Then they're able to, because they have an interest in that contract, if their contract allows for them to assign their interest, they then can assign their interest to someone else and get an assignment fee, or they can execute their interest and purchase the property and then sell it to their end buyer. So in that sense, you can see how the legality of the laws that regulate real estate agents is different from what wholesalers are doing. And if wholesalers aren't doing it in that model that I just expressed, then that's where it becomes gray. But and like I said, it's gray. It's not illegal, it is gray, and there's a difference. There is no black law that says this is illegal, you cannot do this. It's in that untested area of the law, and until we get clear decisions from the Supreme Court or a law written by the Georgia's legislator, that's where we're moving from there.
Very good, very good. So I hope you guys got the answer to that question. But I think what he was saying, and I kind of can see where he's coming from, wholesalers that market properties that they do not have under contract.
That's why I said it's gray.
Yeah. So when we're talking about in a daisy chain situation, so one wholesaler has it under contract with the buyer, and then another wholesaler says, hey, I'm going to take that property because it's on the internet or it happened to come through my email. So I'm going to send it out and mark it up $5,000 more just to see if I can make a little bit of money.
Mm-hmm.
Does that is that still in the gray area for marketing that property that they don't have an interest in?
That he doesn't have an interest in?
Mm-hmm.
No. That now he's acting kind of like a real estate agent.
Okay.
That's why I went through, and that's why it's key to understand what an agent does and what a wholesaler does.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to market the property that's held by, let's say, B is getting it from A. If you want to market that property from B, mm-hmm. you need to either enter into an agreement with B to help mm-hmm. B sell it. Well, then that's still acting like a real estate agent. Mm. This is tricky.
Yeah.
This is very, very
so
tricky.
So would it be a marketing agreement?
It would be a marketing.
Because they're just marketing. Is that?
It would be a marketing agreement, but then how does a marketing agreement differentiate from a listing agreement? And that's really where we're running into our issues. So it sounds like we're going to have to do some research,
yes.
and I'll have to get back to you.
I like it. Okay, good stuff. We have Shireen Wade says you either need a purchase, is that power of attorney or the contract to grant equitable interest to legally market a property without a license. Okay, I guess so. And we have Victor Bomey. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Hi, stranger.
He said he closed with you, I think, last year.
Yeah, we've closed together before.
He says your contract gives you equitable interest. Thus, it's important to always be on the contract holder. Now, these people that are watching and giving advice, I don't know if they are attorneys, but we do have one here today.
And I'll get back to you.
Right. Good stuff. But go ahead and start putting your questions in. We want to make sure any questions that you have, this is the time to ask these questions. Now, how much is an hour of your time worth? How much do you charge for an hour of your time?
$300 per hour.
$300 per hour. So I have actually got her to come. She's not charging us $300 an hour, but y'all get to ask her all the questions you want to ask in this hour, and I'll send you the bill later. So now I guess we got, because I know most of what you deal with is wholesalers, so I want to make sure. And a lot of people that are watching are in the wholesale business. So I want to make sure we kind of hone in on some of the things that we should, as wholesalers, should be paying most attention to. And we talked about, so the daisy chain scenario. If you receive a contract from a person who has a contract with the actual buyer, mm-hmm. how does that, and then, some wholesalers that are wholesaling, that once they get a contract, then they'll do a contract with another buyer, wholesaler / whatchamacallit, we'll say that. How does that process happens in that type of daisy chain situation?
I yell at them first off. That's where I start. And then I say either someone's going to have to do an assignment because I'm not doing A to B, B to C, C to D, D to E. It's too much work. Yes. And mind you, I will charge you on every file as though you were the original purchaser. So that's another incentive to not do an A to B, B to C.
Yes.
C to D. But I really encourage them to either assign their agreement to their end buyer or to the next person, or do a joint venture agreement together, so then that way they're getting paid on one part and we're done, and then we're able to just close it out. Because first of all, it's time consuming, because for every contract there is a separate closing. So that means you each have to come in and sign on 2 files each, except for the owner of record and the end buyer. And then we have to process deeds and payoffs and checks on however many files that are in between. So I really just force people, look, you get an A, a B, and a C. You can't have anything else. Right. So figure it out in the middle.
Absolutely. So have you had a situation where there was an A to B, B to C, D to E, F to G, H to I,
yes,
J to K?
And you know what happened? I didn't find out that it was going to be an A to B, B to C, C to D until the very last minute. And the alleged end buyer shows up and is like, "Oh, I have another contract," and we're like, "Are you?" So I smiled and I sent Jasmine to work on the file, and we knocked it out. But that's the other thing I don't like. I don't like last minute surprises. And for you guys, I know everybody in life don't like unexpected changes. We really don't like them. And as a penalty now, because last year I was learning, and it was a very, like you said, it's an expensive lesson to learn.
Yes, indeed.
If you make last minute changes like that, we're increasing your fee by $250. Period. Because we have to be compensated for the sense of urgency you just put us in, for whatever else you've delayed us from doing. So make sure you have everything arranged. And most wholesalers know each other, talk to each other. And you will make it easier on me if you just communicate with each other. Communication is key.
Absolutely. And not competition with each other.
Don't be mad that John is making X and Bill is making Y.
Right,
Be like, okay,
right,
cool.
right.
So on the next deal, we're going to reverse that and make a joke about it and just keep moving.
Keep it moving. Keep it moving. That's what makes our business, that's what would make our business a whole lot easier.
Yes.
If we communicate and had these conversations and made things work a lot smoother. Tyson Merriweather says Glenn for president.
I agree. I co-sign that.
Yeah, I was going to make a comment about, border and all that stuff, but I'm going to leave that alone. When you close on assignments in your office, are wholesalers listed on the HUD?
So they're not listed per se. What it reflects on a HUD is an assignment fee, and that's charged to the buyer. The seller is not seen on the seller's side. Oh, and I don't do separate HUDs for buyers and sellers. That is my way of disclosing. So if the seller ventures off and looks at the other side, that's what the seller does. But I have to cover my ass legally, and so don't ever ask.
Right. Good stuff.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please, I curse like a sailor. I've been trying to...
We haven't determined the rating of the show yet. If
okay,
it's
I'm
PG
working.
PG or R or PG-13.
So I won't get into F-bombs. I promise.
We're still working that out. We haven't got the FCC regulations yet.
Fair enough.
But maybe if we go to television, we can start working that out. So all you sponsors out there, we're looking for the sponsorship to help us get there. Anyhow, that's my plug for the moment. Oh, speaking of plugs, you have something coming up. Is it tomorrow?
It is tomorrow.
Okay.
I am having a client appreciation, and I'm sorry if I didn't. All right, disclaimer. Jennifer told me I have 2 years that my body is recovering from having a baby. So forgive me that I still somewhat have pregnancy brain. Thank you, Jennifer. I love you.
So that's her disclaimer, her excuse.
So if I fail, I was literally last night, people came across my mind and I started inviting. But I'm having a client appreciation at my office just to say thank you for everybody who went through last year with me. That was with me having Charles in the office. That was with me being pregnant and having to go to the hospital, trying to still do closings. That was with just people going through my growing pains with me. And it's a small reception. It's going to be wine, cheese, hors d'oeuvres. God, I can't speak English, which is French. And it's just my way of saying thank you. And it's also an opportunity for you guys to get together because it's going to be mostly wholesalers, real estate agents. It's a great chance to network and talk to each other. And I've been trying to get a space where I pull everybody I know together because I figured if I can pull you guys together, you can build a team and build something bigger and we can do something great in the city. So
Absolutely.
It's at 6 tomorrow. My office is located at 881 Ponce de Leon Avenue, Northeast. Remember that Northeast. And it's from 6 to 9, so come on by.
Come on by. And I'm going to be there at 5:30 because I know some of y'all people, y'all going to eat up everything before I get there. So I'm going to get there early. We have Nisha Smith says, I have found a new attorney. Very good. Yes, indeed. Definitely support her. Cynthia says, Bobby keeps it real. Wow, we got some interesting comments here today.
What you got?
Shireen says, a cussing attorney is for me.
That's all of us, actually.
When you deal with the stuff that you deal with, sometimes it happens. I get it. Believe me. So I want to see who else had some other questions here. Okay, we don't have any other. Oh, no. Oh, great info. Looking forward to working with you. That's James Nobles. Shout out to James. James does quite a bit of wholesale business, so definitely come and bring your business to Pavi.
I look forward to it, James.
Yes, indeed. So, in a double closing scenario, let's talk about that. I know some wholesalers are wondering, new wholesalers, when do I double close? When should I or when shouldn't I? Or is there a situation where they should be in an A to B or B to C or C to D type of scenario? When should a wholesaler double close, do you think?
So, pulling off one recent example, when the wholesaler who initially got the deal has pissed off the seller and doesn't want the seller to know who they are. Hint, hint, you know who you are. So then it's better to do an A to B, B to C, because then the seller doesn't necessarily have to deal with that wholesaler directly or have to see them at the closing. So my basic barometer for if you should assign or double close is the amount you're making. If you're making more than the seller, double close. Because that's just rude. That's rude. But usually I say about 5K is when people get kind of antsy. So if you're making more than 5K, double close. But if you're making 5K or less, assign. Because you don't want your fee to be eaten up in closing costs.
Right.
And then know your seller. You may have a seller. I recently had a seller that paid this guy $7,500 and he made $40,000. The seller made $40,000 and the guy made $7,500. He didn't care. And he called me to tell me, hey, that $7,500 goes to this guy because he found the buyer.
Wow.
So you just got to know your seller.
Yes. And like you said earlier, relationships. Building that relationship with the seller. Yeah, that makes sense. And letting them know what you're doing. That in many cases I find that's one of the simplest things. Most times people try to be a little sneaky, and they don't disclose to the seller, what they're attempting to do. And it depends. Of course, it depends on the situation with the seller. The seller's, on edge anyway. You may want to be a little careful, I should say.
Yeah,
but,
careful, not sneaky.
Right, exactly. But if you build a relationship, most times you can, work through those situations. I remember earlier, seller Brooklyn, we jumped in the car and drove. Oh, wow. Yeah, you have done some Superwoman stuff. So let me tell you a little bit about Pavi.
Wait.
We were in our office. Was it last year? We were doing. I think we actually were shooting a show in your office.
Yeah. And
we had to move some furniture around to accommodate the amount of people that were in the show. There was the Everybody Eats team. Shout out to John Stafford and the squad. And we were trying to move the table, and she jumped in and started moving tables and moving chairs around. So even when we came in here to do the show today, she's like, "What do you need me to do?"
And he made me do something that I hate doing. He said, "Sit down."
But that quality in you is very important. And I think that's something that Cynthia Bragg just pointed out. She said, "We appreciate you too, Papa." She said, "I remember our seller broke her leg, and we jumped in the car and drove to her house."
Yeah, I remember that day.
You got to have an attorney that's willing to, do what needs to happen, make it happen to get the deal done.
Yeah.
Within reason.
Yes.
Of course.
Within reason.
Don't be abusive, guys. Don't be abusive. Then we have, John said, relationships are key. Build rapport with the sellers. Good stuff. That's another question. Are you able to double close on 100% finance transactions, creative finance deals? I don't know if that's... Are you able to double close on a 100% finance transaction?
So that means the end buyer is getting a loan?
That's where I'm a little confused.
Can you clarify that question for us, and we'll be glad to answer it for you.
Yes. Rick Wright says, do you need transactional funding to double close?
Yes. And the reason is yes. There's no reason, yes.
Good answer. Cynthia says relationships aren't closing. Okay. And all right, let's see. We have John says, "Yep, everybody eats." Oh, she said, "Not double close." Shereen, I'm trying to make sure I get this. Are you able to close on 100% finance transactions? Oh, okay. She said not double close. I'm sorry, I had that wrong. I apologize. She said, are you able to close on 100% financed transactions? or creative finance deals.
So, like when you're trying to get owner's finance with a seller, yeah, we can do those.
Okay.
As long as you, in your agreement, spell out the terms, the interest rate, the long term, and how long it's going to be and what's being paid, yeah, we can do those.
Good stuff. So I guess, in essence, a subject to type of deal, where the owner may take back a second or something like that.
Right.
Okay. Good stuff. I hope that's the question that you were asking. So good deal. I want to talk about a scenario that I had where I had a. I mean, can I talk about this? Yeah, I can talk about it.
Okay.
I won't say the details of it. So I had a scenario where I was buying a property, and I was buying a property to fix it up, and sell it, and go through the whole fix and flip situation. But the seller couldn't get clear title in time of the contract expiration date. And I had given earnest money to their closing attorney. And when the contract had expired, I called up the seller, who's a wholesaler, and I said to him, well, our contract has expired, so I want to get my earnest money back. And he said, no, he's not giving my earnest money back. Now, first of all, he couldn't get clear title within the time that we had on the contract.
Right.
And second of all, he didn't sign the final contract. So we were negotiating, and I sent the final contract over to him, and he never signed it. So once I noticed that, I called up the closing attorney and said, can you just give me my earnest money back? We're no longer in contract. We didn't have a final contract. And the closing attorney told me that they were just going to interplead the money because what the the wholesaler did was, once I told him that we weren't in the contract, he signed it that day and sent it over to the closing attorney. So the closing attorney then said, you were in contract. And I said, no. And I asked him to send me the copy of the signed contract from the wholesaler. And he emailed me the faxed copy that had the date that the contract was faxed, which was the same date. So I guess what the question is, I know it's a long scenario.
Did the attorney interplead? Did he do right by interpleading the funds?
Yes. Well, he didn't. It didn't get to that point, but did he do right by even suggesting that?
Yes. So what we do when there's a dispute over earnest money and there's no signed termination agreement by both parties, because the key when we're dispersing funds, we have to have both parties in agreement. So you can unilaterally terminate, but you can't unilaterally tell me what to do with the money. So I need both parties to be in agreement. So there's two approaches. We can review the contract and say, based on the contract, we believe this is how it should go. And what we have to do is we have to serve a letter to the party whom we are saying you're not entitled to the earnest money, stating and giving them an opportunity to respond to us. If they respond within 10 days, and it's in 10 days, if it's after 10 days, you're ass out. The check's been cut. If they respond in 10 days, then that's when we start the interpleader process, and then we send it to the courts and get everything started there. But so that's the process that we have to take to cover our basis. Even in that situation, I know it seems sketchy because your seller didn't sign and you were technically out of contract, but we still have to make sure we do these steps. Not necessarily from a legal standpoint, but from a title insurance standpoint.
Okay.
Because we're not just bound by the law, the bar, we're also bound by the title insurance companies. And so what they dictate is what goes.
Got it.
And so when an attorney says we can't do something, and note this, if an attorney says that they can't do it, and then you send it to another attorney, guess what? They're not going to be able to do it either, because we talk to each other. We're not enemies. Like, yeah, we're competitors, but I will call somebody like, look, this file's a mess. Don't touch it. Bye. and we usually come to those determinations based on what the title insurance company says. And so if our title insurance company aren't willing to insure, we're not willing to close it. Okay. Because if we close it, then we're on the hook for whatever damages that may come up, because they are not in agreement with it.
Got it. Okay. So I guess, in that scenario, I was a little taken aback, because I'm like, the closing attorney sees that we were not in contract.
Yeah.
So.
But he has to follow those steps to cover his butt.
Yeah. But I take it a little further. I called the bar and told him, yeah, I was a little extra because I felt like the first of all, the person who I was doing the deal with, we had a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, that this didn't work out, and if you're a person who is of esteem,
Mm-hmm.
you should just know what the right thing to do is.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But I felt like him and the closing attorney were friends, and they were trying to take advantage of me, and I'm not a rookie. So I was like, you might get away with that with somebody who don't know no better, So, but it when it got a little extra, but I just felt like in that situation, even the closing attorney, even if he did have to do that, he should have at least explained it.
Yes.
But he never even, he said that now you are under contract, so this is the route that I have to go. I'm like, but that contract wasn't signed.
Well, also, in your contracts, make sure you have a sign by date.
Yeah, I do. I do.
Okay.
And it wasn't signed by that date. So
yeah, it wasn't a binding contract.
Right. That's what.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah. So that was a situation.
And guys, that's a lesson of integrity too. I have worked with wholesalers from different backgrounds, and that's really one of the things that I use to vet the people I work with is integrity. If you lack it, I don't want to work with you, because one minute you may be cheating X, Y, and Z, the next minute you may be cheating me, and
right.
So if you're going to operate in this business, let's try to show the rest of the real estate realm that you are a force to be reckoned with, and that's because you operate with integrity.
All right. What they say, scratch a lie, find the thief. We have Rick Wright says, I introduced my buyer as my money partner at closing. The closing attorney laughed and said, wait,
what?
Let me read this before I read it out loud, Rick. But you already put it on there, so let me see what you said there. The closing attorney laughed and said, he's a little more than that. Then proceeded to say how wholesaling is illegal and the real estate commission is cracking down on it. I definitely need a closing attorney who is hip to the game. So I guess he's saying that he introduced his buyer as his money partner. The closing attorney said that he's a little more than that, and then told him that, I don't know if there's a question in that, but it's interesting. She asked how much the earnest money was $2,500, more than I've ever given, more than I ever will give. So if you're looking to do a deal with me and you're looking for more than $2,000 earnest money, it's not going to happen. See, at what point does it become petty or worth the trouble? Oh, it was $2,500. It was, well, I guess the question she's asking, at what point does it become worth the trouble to go back and forth about the earnest money?
It's your money.
It's
always your money.
Yeah.
And
for me, it was the principle. It was the principle of the person I was dealing with, because we have a relationship. If it was $250, dude, you don't supposed to get no money out of that. So that was. And
that's probably eaten up by the attorney for doing. Right. Oh, and also be considerate. These things cost. Yes. So don't send us over files that you're not really ready to close, because we're going to order title and we're going to pull all these things that cost us money, and we will charge you.
So again, let's you brought something up. So, and I guess it's back to the question I asked earlier. When someone submits their contract to you, and oftentimes you'll have wholesalers that get it under contract with the seller, and they want to get the title process started before even finding their end buyer. So when the end buyer comes, they can say, title's already been pulled, let's close. How do you handle that, or do you allow that?
I don't. And so for those who know me and work with me, they know to say, hey, Pavi, I don't have a buyer yet. Can you pull a prelim title for me? And that means I will run a prelim search on GSCCA just to see what's going on with the file before we even order title out. And so I take that hit of time just to make sure I'm not wasting my money later. And so be upfront, and that's key. It's like we've been talking about relationships and we've been talking about communication. That's why you want to have a relationship with your attorney, because you want to let them know these things ahead of time. So then that way they're able to adjust. Because I'll make a note on file, don't order title until this day. but prelim has been done. These are the issues. And then I can tell you what the issues you're having so we can fix those before you even find a buyer.
Got it. How are the water bill situations in Atlanta? Is that still going on?
Recently, they have a website where you can pay, and that's now down. So it's been.
They still having issues in Atlanta with the water bill?
Yeah, they're still having issues in the city in general. That was before the hack, but I live in Atlanta. I love my city. It's just we got to do better. Come on, Black people.
Right.
We really run in this city. We got to do better.
Absolutely. Pavi said it. She's gonna be the next mayor.
Actually, that is one of my dreams.
Okay. Pavi for mayor of Atlanta.
But it's getting better. They're moving faster. Once they get payment in, I haven't had it. I actually, during the hack, I didn't have any troubles getting water bills. Mm-hmm. They were very consistent, sent them. It's just, I think what's happening is the people who are sending them out have 1 or 2 computers to work on, and they're able to get them out, but it just takes them a little bit of time. So it requires patience.
Got it.
And then note that when you order a water bill and you've paid it, they have a 10-day period to have it out to you. Otherwise, I can't remember what it says specifically, but I think if they don't have it by a certain point, it may not be due. I have to look that up to confirm, but
that's one of those.
I'll get back to
you. We have Shireen says, for me, do I feel comfortable paying assignment fee upon executing the contract? No.
No, don't give anybody money.
Right. And she says, have you come across this situation?
I have come across the situation, but they knew each other, and they had been working together for years. And so if anything went wrong, they would have refunded each other.
Okay. Cynthia. Okay, Cynthia.
What'd she say?
She talked about the wholesaler. I think I told her about this situation before. She said, you were absolutely right. Your earnest money should have been released. We both know not to deal with that wholesaler again.
Dang. That wholesaler's on a blacklist. Oh. By the way, can we create something like that? Like a blacklist for wholesalers, so then that can be passed around and be like, nah, don't touch them.
Listen, Pavi said it, so it shall be done.
Thank you.
John says Pavi for mayor. You know you got our votes. Well, first of all, I want to talk about the event that we're going to be doing.
Okay.
Which is the Wonder Women event.
Okay.
Will you be on the panel again?
I would love to.
Okay, so yeah, we gonna, because this information is invaluable. We need to have you come back, and we're gonna probably make people pay for it this time.
Cool.
What you think?
I like that.
Okay.
Pavi
said it, so it shall be done.
I think I'm gonna use that line from now on. When I'm at home, Pavi said it, so it shall be done.
So
hopefully Cedric will follow.
Shout out to Cedric. Is Cedric on Facebook?
Yeah,
Is he watching? Okay.
Cedric, he's doing a IT camp at the Candler Library today.
Okay. Well, shout out to Mr. Dortch. I won't say that. Mr. Dortch. I was gonna say Mr. Pavielle Dortch. Don't jump on me next time I see you. All right. So, are there any? Oh wow, we're coming up on that time. I had so many other questions.
Go for it. I really gave you until about 2. So if you want to use me, you have me.
Okay. Well, hopefully they don't put us out here. Our show is supposed to end at 1, but I do have another question.
Okay.
All right, just make sure they ain't ready to put us out yet. What was the question I had about closing? Do I want to ask this question on the show? Maybe I'll ask that. Maybe that'll be a sidebar. Okay. But I had another question about tax liens.
Mm-hmm.
Now, people say there's only a few people in the city that do tax liens, as far as like clearing the title and all that. I know that's an area that you work in. Is that something that you've done an extensive amount of work?
Okay, so you're referring to when people are buying the tax deeds and
tax deed, when they need to get the
quiet title actions done. I always refer it out to a firm that I love and admire, because these guys have been behind me the whole way through. So I always send that to them to do, and then I'll finish it up by doing the closing. And I'll shoot out a plug. Ubin, Mansour, they're the greatest in Atlanta. They know what they're doing. They've been doing this for years. and they're two amazing men that I appreciate and have helped me immensely in this business.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
But there are a few attorneys, but I would always suggest to keep it separate. I would have an attorney who cleared the title and did the quiet title action, then I'll have an attorney who does the closing.
Oh, okay.
Because then that way the attorney who does the closing can double check to make sure the person who cleared the title did everything properly.
Okay.
Because then if it's in one pot, you run the risk of, oh, well, we did it, so we just keep going, but they may have missed serving somebody, or they may have missed this. And so it's like two sets of eyes on everything.
Got it. Okay. So what are some common title issues that you see?
Right now?
Yes.
Everything. Okay, so most of the properties that everybody's trying to acquire were either purchased between 2005 and 2008. And for some reason, all the titles look like crap. And that's because either somebody was supposed to be foreclosed on but never was foreclosed on, but there's a loan still in their name, and so that needs to be cleared up. Somebody died and none of their children decided to probate their estates. Someone has code enforcement violations that they didn't know about. Code enforcement, open loans. Those are the biggest, and deceased. Those are the biggest issues that come up. Or somebody has lost their property to tax sale and didn't realize that they lost it to tax sale.
Wow.
And so to save yourself time and me energy, use the Fulton County Tax Assessor site. For the most part, their records are up to date, or whatever county assessor site, because even though the name of the owner won't change until January 1st of the next year, at the bottom they give you a list of the transfers between the parties. And so it'll show you if it has been transferred within the recent time period. And it kind of gives you an idea of what title looks like.
So that means that...
And there's another one, breaking chains. Breaking the chain of title.
Oh, okay.
And I'll explain what that means. That means B bought it from A. Let's do it backwards. D bought it from C. A sold it to B, but there was never a deed from B to C. So there's a break. There's no connection between the two deeds.
Wow. Is that because they weren't recorded properly?
It could be because they weren't recorded. Because it wasn't executed. It just a lot of hiccups happen. Got it.
Okay. Oh, John says too many broken chains and titles. Yeah, that kind of stuff. Okay. All right. Are there any parting words that you want to share with the people? Anything that stands out that us as wholesalers and real estate investors need to be paying specific attention to?
Just everything I've said. Act with integrity. Communicate. Be prepared. Be proactive. If you are doing those things, you will be fine in this business. Actually, you'll be fine in life if you do those things.
Yes, very important. Good stuff. One other question: can you close on deals based out of Macon?
Macon, Georgia, yes.
They're Georgia.
I can do any deals, any transactions that take place within the state of Georgia. I am not licensed outside of Georgia, so I cannot. But in Georgia, yes.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, now Dennis has a question. We have a vacant lot, and the description of it in a previous quiet title is incorrect. The description in other county records is correct. So isn't it? So it isn't closed. Okay, so it isn't closed until that's fixed. How do we? Make sure
Whoever did the quiet title action needs to do an order to amend the final order that corrects the legal description. So whoever did that quiet title action, you need to reach back out to and have them file the proper amendments with the court and get it signed off by the judge.
Oh, okay, closable. So it isn't closable until that's fixed. Okay.
Yes.
So hopefully you got the answer that she just gave, which is very valuable. Very valuable. Good stuff. You are Shireen, can you put that question again? Is that you are New York new attorney? Would I need to be present to close? I don't understand. Oh, you are my new attorney. Okay. Like, what is NY? What is that? Okay, got it. She said, you are my new attorney. Would I need to be present to close?
It depends. If you're my seller, we may be able to do a mail away to you where you can go to a notary. It will have to be notarized and witnessed, and everything will have to be, I will need the originals.
Okay, good stuff. All right. This has been an awesome segment today. I wish we had another hour to do this. Would y'all stick around for another hour if we did? But thank you so much for being here today. I certainly do appreciate you taking the time out to do this today. This information is very invaluable. And we're going to be talking about the class that you're going to be teaching.
Yeah.
So be prepared. Get your checkbooks out. Get your credit cards ready. Because if you got some value out of just watching this today, I'm sure you will get much more value out of what she'll be teaching in that class. And you did an awesome job too at the at Errol's event when you were talking about the HUD statements.
That was a hard one.
But that's something that a lot of, I think, experienced people really need to watch. Experienced as well as novice people need to pay attention to, because there's so many things that happen on the HUD that if you miss it, you'll lose.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a lot of fees that get charged that shouldn't be charged. I mean, I see it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that we'll probably have a conversation with. Maybe you can come and speak to our group and talk about that as well.
Cool.
So, guys, thank you all for watching. Thank you for joining. Please go ahead and share this in your groups. Share this in your news feeds. I have some shout-outs. I want to say Team Unique. Robert Yancey is doing something on Saturday.
Okay.
So check that out. I can't remember exactly how to find it, but go to Robert Yancey on Facebook, and I think he's Mr. Invest ATL on Instagram. He's got something happening on Saturday, June 23rd. Then we have Rich Boy. My brother Brian Jubert has an event happening June 30th. There's another contradictory event. Oh my God, I got to shout them all out. They're all my people. Rich Boy has an event that's happening for entrepreneurs and business people on June 30th. Make sure you check that out. And for the wholesalers, there's actually also Wholesalers or Us is having an event on June 30th. So check that out as well. So I had to shout out all my folks. I don't know who else has something else coming up. Oh, we're going to be back in Detroit July 19th, I believe. So for the people that are in Detroit watching, we're going to be teaching a wholesaling class in Detroit. And for July, what's our second Saturday in July? The second Saturday in July, I can't remember what that date is, but we're going to have contractors on 14th. The panel. On the 14th?
Is that right?
I don't know. Is the 14th? Is that the second Saturday?
Mm-hmm. The first Saturday.
Oh, right. Georgia, because we're in Georgia and Detroit. For the second Saturday here in Gwinnett, we're going to have a panel of contractors to come out. Hopefully they show up. Because folks want to know why people have issues with contractors and why contractors don't do what they say they're going to do. And then what we want to give the contractors opportunity to defend themselves for a lot of the flack that they catch. So make sure you guys look for the information on that. That'll be coming out real soon. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Pavi, again for being here. Definitely check her out. And we're going to be over eating all her food tomorrow at the event. What is it called? Merci beaucoup?
Merci beaucoup. Just thank you very much in French.
Very good, very good. I was going to figure that out. I knew that's what that meant. So for those of you that will be joining her tomorrow with that, we'll see you over there tomorrow. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.